Hey, it's Jen Vax with YourColorStyle.com, and in this video I'm going to share with you the differences between bright, cool, and medium and bright, cool, and deep. I get a lot of questions between the difference of these two types because often a person isn't sure if they're medium or deep, but also in particular for bright and cools, this seems to be the area where there's the most squishiness and uncertainty. So I'm going to give you some examples of what I look for when determining whether someone is bright, cool, and medium or bright, cool, and deep. So just to back up a tiny bit, when we talk about someone who is bright and cool, we're talking about someone that wears bright colors really well, bright jewel tones. They have cool undertones. So a lot of the very warm colors that I've blocked out here on the color wheel, ranging from tomato reds to golden yellows, really don't flatter them for the most part. And the medium and deep are the level of depth, but it can be a little bit unclear when it comes to this type because there's a lot of high contrast with bright and cools often, and so light is easy. Light is light hair, light eyes, light skin. So if you have fair skin, blue eyes, blonde hair, and you fit the bright and cool description, you're going to be bright, cool, and light. But medium and deep get a little bit different. Now, at a very high level, the difference, once you decide which type you are, the biggest difference is the level of intensity of the color that you can wear that's most flattering on you, and the higher the contrast. So someone who is bright, cool, and deep can wear extremes. So, and I'll show you in just a moment. So black and white is an extreme. Really high contrast patterns are going to look really great, and high contrast against the individual. Also in this color wheel is pure orange, pure bright orange, not a darker orange where it starts to get earthy. That's not going to work. But a bright orange, if you can find a true orange, meaning a perfect balance of red and yellow, works really well for someone who is bright, cool, and deep, and okay for bright, cool, and medium, but it's not going to feel right, okay? And that's not always true, always for someone who's bright, cool, and deep, but is often, I've noticed that they can wear orange where other people can't really pull it off. All right, so let's get into some examples here. I'm going to use the color analysis cards. Bright, cool, and medium is on the left, and bright, cool, and deep is on the right. And as you can tell, there's very little difference between these cards, which is also why people get a little bit unsure when they're doing their own color analysis, because the cards are so similar. And the biggest difference here between the two is that on the right of the bright, cool, and deep, the colors are very, very dark and not as dark on the medium. But other than that, it's going to be really hard to make a difference. I'm going to give you some tips on how you can figure out whether you belong in bright, cool, and medium or bright, cool, and deep. So this is an individual that I consider bright, cool, and deep. She has very dark hair, almost black, very bright eyes, very fair skin. So she has a natural high contrast about her. Obviously the bright colors look amazing on her, and when I put a black and white pattern up against her, again, a high contrast, intense pattern, it looks amazing. I can totally see her in like a black and white striped dress or top, something very geometric, be very pretty. When I put a bright, cool, and medium pattern up against her, she still looks pretty good. So she could probably pull off both, but the thing is that if you can pull off the higher intensity, higher contrast patterns really well, then I would choose bright, cool, and deep. I'm showing you this one because this is a perfect example of a bright, cool, and medium pattern. It's still high contrast, but not as high contrast, and still but has enough vividness where not everyone can still wear that type of pattern, and it would look better on someone who's bright, cool, and medium. Now, she looks good in both, so I would choose bright, cool, and deep for her. Here's another good example of someone who has very dark skin, eyes, and hair, has the higher contrast more in the eyes and needs that contrast. So therefore, she definitely fits into the bright, cool, and medium or deep category. So you can see here she looks amazing in those bright jewel tones because she needs that against her skin. The high contrast also looks amazing. She would look absolutely stunning in white. Pure white up against that dark skin creates that high contrast. And with her darkness of her hair and eyes, she's absolutely bright, cool, and deep. Now, when I put a bright, cool, and medium pattern up against her, it's not that it looks bad, but you can see that it's so much better for her in the higher contrast. So yet if you have to pick, I would choose bright, cool, and deep. Another good example is someone who has just very dark eyes, very cool, bright white hair. So I automatically see her as, she has kind of olive skin, but that's a whole nother conversation. I definitely see her as bright and cool. And because of her eyes, I have said she's bright, cool, and deep. Now, she looks amazing in the bright jewel tones, no doubt about it. When I put her up against a high contrast, I really like her in the high contrast patterns. I think it really just flatters her greatly. When I put her in the medium contrast, it's not that she looks bad. Again, I choose the higher contrast for her. This is how you can kind of make that final decision. Can you wear those higher contrast patterns really well? Or is the medium contrast feeling a little bit better on you? I'm going to give you some examples of people here in a moment that really need the medium versus the high. This is one more example of someone who really looks great in the high contrast. So she's got that almost black, shiny hair, dark eyes, medium skin. So her overall contrast isn't very high. But she looks really good in those bright jewel tones. And when I put up against a high contrast pattern, I really like it on her. It picks up the whites in her eyes and teeth, the blackness in her hair. And when I put a medium contrast against her, I don't really think it does nearly as much. And so I would choose bright, cool, and deep for her. Now, here is someone who has bright white hair, really dark eyes, olive skin. I definitely believe she is bright and cool. I immediately assume that she's bright, cool, and deep because of her very dark eyes. But when I put a super high contrast pattern against her, I feel it's a little harsh. I don't really feel like it's in alignment with her. I feel like it's a little bit too much on her. If I put the medium contrast on her, it's calming me down a bit when I look at her. So for her, because she's so much more dominantly lighter versus the dark eyes, we take the overall appearance and she fits more into the medium category. So this is one that I actually got wrong. And so I started doing this presentation realizing, she could definitely still pull off the bright, cool, and deep color palette, but I like the medium on her better. And there's plenty of deep colors in the bright, cool, and medium color palette. It's not like you suddenly are without color. And honestly, she's still gonna look amazing in white and those colors as well. Here's another good example of someone that she has a fairly high contrast, fair skin, darker hair, but her hair is more of a medium brown. She looks amazing in those bright jewel tones, so I definitely feel confident and bright and cool. But when you put a high contrast, bright, cool, and deep pattern against her, it doesn't fit. Her hair isn't that dark, for example. It's more of a medium, and so there's not as much intensity with that contrast about her. When you put the bright, cool, and medium, the little bit more of a medium contrast on her, oh, it's so much better. So she's definitely bright, cool, and medium. Here's somebody else that I actually use this photo often for examples of bright, cool, and deep because her hair is so dark and she has that fair skin, bright blue eyes, clearly is bright and cool because she looks great in those bright jewel tones. However, when I put the bright, cool, and deep color, the pattern on her, I'm not loving it nearly as much as the medium. I kind of still feel like she's right in the middle, and my gut tells me it might be because this particular model might have colored her hair. I'm wondering if her natural hair color might be a little bit lighter, or maybe it has some gray in it or something that she's colored it, because it feels like it feels like she might have colored it. I don't know because I don't know this person, but I do know that even though by textbook with her darker hair, I thought that she could lean into deep, but I really prefer the medium contrasts on her. So she would be bright, cool, and medium. Another good example is someone who has medium hair. She has a higher contrast about her, those bright blue eyes, fair skin, darker hair. Again, when I put the high contrast pattern up against her, not loving it nearly as much as the medium contrast. So she would be bright, cool, and medium. So I hope that helps. If you're someone who's kind of on the fence between bright, cool, and medium and bright, cool, and deep, know that if you feel like you're bright, cool, and deep, it means that not only do you have deep features and that you can wear the deep colors and the bright jewel tones, but also that those higher contrast patterns are going to look amazing on you and light you up versus being overpowering. And that could help you make the decision between bright, cool, and medium and bright, cool, and deep. And if you're trying to figure out what colors flatter you best, and most importantly, to learn what colors to avoid that drain you or overpower you, take the quiz out on yourcolorstyle.com/quiz. It's absolutely free, and it'll walk you through step by step on how you can figure out what types of colors are going to make you shine. I'm Jen Vex, and thanks for watching.